Mischievous Kitties, the source of the food bowl. The kitties were right in the middle of their morning routine of stretching and grooming when the sound of the kitty kibble bouncing off the metal bowl rang from the kitchen. All of the kitties perked their ears up at the sound, but Mr. Fluffles didn't waste any time. He bolted from the living room to the hallway between the stairs and the kitchen, his nails tapping on the wood floor. Realizing too late that he was moving too fast for the turn, the Tuxedo Kitty's paws lost their grip on the wood floor and he barrel rolled right past the doorway of the kitchen. When he finally stopped rolling, he was sitting on the rug by the front door and was very dizzy. But that only lasted a moment. He picked his little round body up off the rug and bounded into the kitchen as only he could. He set his eyes on the shiny metal bowl and its contents. His mouth watered at the sight of the tasty, crunchy kitty kibble goodness. He started happily munching on his breakfast when the other kitties finally entered the kitchen. They all briefly looked around and cautiously approached the bowl. They all knew Mr. Fluffles was having a hard time sharing food, but they hoped every day that it would be different. But, as with all those days before, today was not different. Mr. Fluffles' little ears perked up, and he suddenly realized the other kitties were getting near the food. He immediately flattened his ears back and started to hiss and growl. He turned around, putting his back towards the bowl, protecting it. Mocha, Pepper, and Jewel backed up a few steps and started to group up, getting ready for another fight. Mr. Fluffles acted like this anytime one of them got too close to the food bowl. The only one he didn't try to intimidate was Peaches, but lately he had been letting Cream get closer too. Not close enough to eat at the same time, but it still seemed to be progressing towards a friendship. Deciding it was time to test that theory, Cream approached slowly around the opposite side of the bowl, with her head down but her ears up, trying to show herself as a friend who was not interested in a fight. Mr. Fluffles watched her intently. When the food bowl was between them, she attempted to take a bite. With a shrill cry, Mr. Fluffles lunged at her, teeth bared and claws ready to strike, but fell short, face down in the food. He felt a tug on his tail and looked up to see the food bowl slipping away. He stretched out his paws, trying to crawl back towards it, but with no success. He stopped fighting, whimpering a little as the kibble continued to slip further and further away. As the others carefully approached the bowl again and began eating, he then turned his head angrily towards his tail to see who it was that was keeping him from protecting the kitty kibble. He saw Peaches, and his anger immediately melted away, replaced with big, sad eyes and a quivering lip. He was speechless. How could she do this? Had she forgotten how precious the supply of food is? She gently dropped his tail and stepped over him. She lay down perpendicular to him and draped one paw protectively across his back, keeping him from trying to make another lunge at the others. "We no longer need to fight for our food," she said loud enough that only he could hear her gentle and calm voice. "Our new owner will always make sure the food bowl has food every morning and night." She gently cleaned between his ears, and he laid his pouting face between his paws, glaring at the gorging group. "Now we need to share with the others," Peaches continued. "This is a safe place, and they are good kitties. You should give them a chance." Mr. Fluffles didn't reply except for a huff of disapproval. Soon the others were done and walking away from the food bowl and out of the kitchen. Then Peaches got up and walked over to the bowl and sat waiting for him to join her. Mr. Fluffles stayed flat on the floor for a few more moments, pouting. But then he rolled his eyes and stood up, walking stiffly over to Peaches. She might be right, but he didn't have to be happy about it. As he reached the bowl, Peaches started to eat her fill of breakfast. Mr. Fluffles looked down, and his eyes widened as he could see, sitting there among the scattered pieces of food, was his reflection staring back at him from the shiny bottom of the metal bowl. Mr. Fluffles looked quickly over to Peaches, who was happily crunching on her breakfast. She seemed almost unaware of the fact that there was a shiny spot in front of her as well, and it was getting bigger. How could she be so calm? Did she not realize that the food was running out? She paused in her crunching and shot him a sideways glance along with a flick of her tail. He looked back at the shiny spot and nibbled on some of the pieces around it. His heart started pounding harder as he saw the shiny spot getting bigger with every bite. He had to do something. He had to make sure that the food did not run out. He looked around between bites. If he found the source of the food, it would never run out. He wondered if he should tell Peaches. Probably not. The way she keeps talking, she wouldn't understand. He then decided that he should hang back after breakfast and try to find the source on his own. Once breakfast was finished, Peaches cleaned her face and then cleaned Mr. Fluffles' face. "See?" she asked. "There is still food in the bowl for snacks later, and then Owner will fill it again tonight for dinner. Nothing to worry about." "If you say so," he answered with forced positivity. "Come on. I can do a better job of cleaning your face while you sit on your favorite pillow, and then you can nap in the sun," she suggested. "Maybe later," he replied. "Are you mad at me?" "No." He hesitated, worried that she might try to stop his plan. I'm not quite done with the food. You go ahead and groom. I'll be out shortly." "Oh, okay, that's fine. Take your time so you don't get a tummy ache." She then walked into the living room to find a spot to groom herself comfortably, but Mr. Fluffles stayed in the kitchen. "Let's see. It should be a big green bag. So where's it hiding?" He walked around the kitchen once, but couldn't find the big green bag. He quickly lost patience and plopped down on the floor with a deep sigh. "I'll never find it this way," he lamented, staring at his fluffy white paws. "Find what?" a perky but semi-familiar voice asked. Startled, he looked up to see the prissy girl kitty with the pink bow. What was her name again? "Huh?" was all he could reply. "What are you trying to find?" she asked as she absently cleaned a spot between her ear and the pretty pink bow. He hesitated for a moment. He didn't have a reason to trust her. She could tell Peaches his plan, and he would never find the source. But on the other paw, she has lived in this house longer than he had. Maybe she would know the location of the food source. "I'm looking for the source of the food. The bowl's almost empty, and if I find the source, then I can keep the bowl always full." The white kitty stared at him for a few heartbeats. Mr. Fluffles continued. "Will you help me? Sure," she provided. "Right," he acknowledged. "Will you help me, Jewel? You've lived here longer than me." She laughed. "By only 3 weeks. Milka and Cream were here twice that long before you and Peaches arrived. They would know better than any kitty." "Oh, well, could you at least take a guess?" he asked with big eyes. She giggled. "You're so cute. I'll give it a try. Let's see." She stood up and walked past him, her nose pointed up, sniffing the air. She stopped in front of the cabinets and took a deep breath. "The food bag is up there." She stretched her paw out towards the cabinets above the counter. Mr. Fluffles' eyes followed the long distance from the floor to the counter to the cabinet hanging high above the counter. His jaw slacked. "How am I supposed to get up there?" He stood up and walked over to Jewel. She tilted her head to the side as she looked him over. He could guess what she was seeing. His stubby little legs. He was the shortest and roundest of the 6 kitties. "I know," he said as he sat down in front of her. "There is no way I could get up there." "Yeah, not by yourself. But I can help you get up there," she said carefully. His ears perked up and he looked up at her with big sparkles in his eyes. "Really? You would?" he exclaimed excitedly. "Wait, how?" he asked confused. She giggled at him, stood up, and reached her paws up past the cabinet doors. "I can almost reach the counter." She looked over her shoulder to him. "If you stand on my head, then maybe you could get up there." I don't know about that," he said, cautiously backing away. I don't want to hurt you." She giggled. You don't weigh much more than me. And you don't know how many times Pepper has used me for a stepladder. It's okay, I promise. You can trust me. Could he? He never trusted any other kitty except Peaches. She always kept him safe. But she has also been encouraging him to trust these other kitties. Maybe he should start with Jewel. Okay, what's the plan? I can't climb to your head when you are all stretched out. Too high for my stubby legs. They aren't stubby. They're cute, she responded. How about I lay down and you climb on my back? As I stretch out, you climb on my head and then the counter. Sound good? He didn't like it, but he didn't have any other options. He carefully climbed on her back and onto the top of her head. He wiggled his butt a little as he judged the distance of the now closer counter and jumped. His front paws landed with a squeak, and he immediately started to slide off the cold counter, his back paws dangling. Find a back foothold, Jewel cried out quickly. He kicked his back paws several times, finding nothing but air, but then something between the toe beans of his right back paw. It was hard and cold, but solid. He had to work to keep his paw from instinctively pushing away from the cold sensation, and instead clamped down around it, and he stopped sliding. He used the foothold to push himself up, and after a few moments, he successfully reached the counter, panting lightly. It worked. He almost couldn't believe how it worked. He looked around. The world looked so different from this far up off the floor. He looked down at Jewel, who happily mewed at him. Great job! Now it's just above your head, she instructed. He nodded at her and looked up. The cabinet looked so much bigger up close. He swallowed hard as it loomed over his head. He stretched up towards it just as Jewel had done. His paws missed by a long shot, and he fell flat on the counter with a loud squeak. What's wrong? Jewel called up. Too high, he moaned. I can't stretch out enough to reach it. Jewel hummed, placing one paw over her mouth as she tried to think of the next step. She then called up to him. Hang on, let me try. What are you doing? Came a shrill, scolding voice from the other side of the kitchen, cutting Jewel off mid-sentence. Startled, Mr. Fluffles sat up, turned his head around quickly. His heart sank a little as he saw Peaches. The brown kitty was behind her, but he ignored him. Peaches sprinted over next to Jewel, but her attention was completely on Mr. Fluffles. Come back down here before you get in more trouble or worse, get hurt, she called up to him firmly. He peeked his face over the side of the counter so he could see her. I have to get the source of the food, he pleaded. The food bowl is empty. She closed her eyes and paused, trying to let her anger cool a little before she replied. It will be filled again tonight when owner gets back home, she said slowly to help her control her tone. She looked back up at him. Just like the past few weeks, food every morning and night. We are not going to go hungry here. Jewel nodded in agreement. So you can calm down, Peaches encouraged. Maybe she was right. He's always been able to trust Peaches. He knew now he could trust Jewel. Maybe that means he can trust Owner and the other kitties too. He looked over the edge again and instinctively scrunched himself up on the counter. I can't get down, Mr. Fluffles replied suddenly. It's too high. Without another word, Peaches ran back to the living room. The brown kitty stayed in the kitchen by Jewel, but Mr. Fluffles still ignored him and waited for Peaches to return. She returned a few long moments later, dragging in a very fluffy pillow. Jewel ran up and helped her drag it over, and they placed it against the lower cabinets. Jump! With a few scared mews, Mr. Fluffles lunged, but his paws lost their grip on the counter, and he ended up skating, spinning, and slid awkwardly off the edge. He landed on his back, deep into the fluffy pillow. Peaches grabbed the dizzy kitty by the scruff of his neck and pulled him to his feet. being careful to keep him on the pillow. She then proceeded to groom the fur where she had grabbed him. "Are you okay?" she asked him, her eyes full of concern. "Yeah, I think so," he replied, shaking off the last of the tingles in his back legs. Suddenly, scratching noises drew their attention back up to the top of the counter. They saw the brown kitty was stretching up and could just barely reach the top cabinet. The scratching noise was his paw trying to get a grip on the door. "Mer-Ka!" Jewel cried out. "Be careful!" "How did you get up there?" Mr. Fluffles asked, perplexed. Mer-Ka pointed to his left at the edge of the counter. "Jumped on the trash bin and then the counter." Jewel looked at the plastic trash can that sat a little lower than the cabinets. "I didn't know we could do that." Mer-Ka opened the door and peeked in the cabinet. "Aha! Found it!" he exclaimed. "You did?" Mr. Fluffles asked excitedly, leaning back on his hind legs. "Yep," Mer-Ka said as he jumped, grabbed one corner of the green bag with his teeth, and pulled it down. Mer-Ka let go of the bag, and it went over his head off the counter and landed on the floor with a loud plop, sending the other kitties scrambling away for a moment. Mr. Fluffles was the first to run back to investigate the bag. It had opened during its fall, and some pieces lay on the floor around it. He ignored those pieces and opened the bag further, climbing into it until only his white-tipped tail was visible. "Yes, we found the source!" Jewel and Peaches started to sniff the bag when Mer-Ka jumped off the counter and landed near the bag, making them both jump a foot in the air. Pepper and Cream peeked around the corner, investigating the commotion. Cream smiled and walked away, but Pepper stepped forward to sniff the bag. "I'm usually the one getting in trouble," he commented, a little impressed. "We're not in trouble," Mer-Ka protested. Pepper snickered. "Better be glad owner isn't home." Mr. Fluffles didn't hear any of it. He was too busy crunching on the kitty kibble. Then he was pulled out of the bag by his tail by Peaches. She started to clean the crumbs off of his face, but he stopped her. He then walked over to the bag where the pieces of food were scattered on the floor around the opening. He picked up a mouthful of pieces, carried it over, and laid it down between Jewel and Mer-Ka. "Thank you," he said, looking up at them with big appreciative eyes, and hoping they would accept the gift. They happily ate the food. Mr. Fluffles purred lightly, and then ran between Peaches' legs and jumped back in the bag. Exasperated, Peaches looked at Jewel and Mer-Ka. Jewel walked out without a word, but Mer-Ka mewed. "Pepper and I will keep an eye on him, if you want to go." Peaches could tell she was sleepy. A nap would do her some good. She nodded and walked out. All three boys attacked the food bag. After a good nap, Peaches noticed that Mr. Fluffles was still not with her. She looked around the living room and didn't see Mer-Ka or Pepper either. She walked back into the kitchen and was shocked by the scene. All three boys were laid out with fat bellies and food comas. Peaches sniffed each of them to make sure they were okay. Once she got to Mr. Fluffles, she noticed he was covered nose to tail in food dust. She started cleaning his face. He squirmed and looked at her with big round eyes. "Peaches," he whimpered. "Yes?" She nuzzled him. "My tummy hurts." He pointed a paw to his rounded belly. She sighed. "Yes, that is why it is bad to overeat. But it's okay. You will feel better soon." "Will the others be okay?" "Yes. You will all probably hurt and be sleepy for a little while. But just don't overeat again, and you won't feel like this again." "Okay." He lifted his head a little bit, and she sat down close to him. He laid his head on her paws, and then she began the daunting task of cleaning all the kitty kibble dust off of him.